Good evening and welcome to the Sleep to Lore series. Tonight we will talk about New Spring, the prequel that reveals the beginning of the great hunt for the dragon reborn and the meeting of a legendary Aes Sedai and her warder. If you would like, subscribe or comment to help this channel grow. Before we begin, I have a question for you. Do you prefer reading prequels before the main series to understand the history, or do you read them after to avoid spoilers? Let me know in the comments below. Now, let us journey back to the end of the Aiel War. Chapter 1. The Hook. A biting wind sweeps across the killing fields outside Tar Valon, carrying the chill of deep winter and the scent of blood. It has been 3 days of slaughter in the snow, a conflict known as the Aiel War. Though to the men fighting it, it feels less like war and more like an execution. We open with Lan Mandragoran, the uncrowned king of Malkier. He walks the perimeter of the camp, a man composed of hard angles and harder duty. The atmosphere is thick with exhaustion. The grand coalition of nations gathered here is ragged, freezing, and terrified of the desert warriors in the dark. Lan's equipment tells a story of its own. He carries a sword wrought with the one power before the breaking of the world. It is a weapon from the Age of Legends, unbreakable and eternally sharp. A heavy metaphor for Lan himself. A relic of a destroyed era, enduring simply because it must. As he checks the sentries, we see his leadership style. He finds men sleeping on their feet, a death sentence if the Aiel were near. Yet, Lan doesn't scream. He speaks with a quiet, terrifying certainty. He knows that the psychological weight of the Aiel, those ghosts who kill from the shadows, is a far greater motivator than any shout. He commands through presence, anchoring his men against their own fear. He is joined by Bukama, his mentor, and the last surviving link to his infancy. Bukama is a man etched in steel and tradition, wearing the Hadori, the braided leather headband of the Malkieri. They represent a dead nation, 2 men carrying the weight of a fallen kingdom. They discuss the enemy. To the rest of the world, the Aiel are savages, but Lan and Bukama sense a pattern. The wheel of time turns, and history repeats its catastrophes. The Trolloc Wars, the War of the 100 Years, and now this. They suspect the Dark One's hand in this invasion, not realizing the Aiel's true, hidden purpose. The quiet introspection is shattered by a messenger from the Tyrant contingent. The contrast here is deliberate and jarring. The messenger is scented with roses, dripping with silk and arrogance, barely deigning to speak to the rough-clad borderlanders. He brings a demand from a Lord Imaris. Lan is to take his men to a ridge called the Hook, to act as an anvil so Imaris can be the hammer. It is a dangerous, perhaps suicidal request, delivered with disrespect. Here we witness Lan's mental discipline, a precursor to the warder bond he will one day hold. He feels the anger at the Tyrant's rudeness, but he utilizes the Kodi, the oneness. He feeds his emotions into a mental flame until he is void, floating in emptiness, detached from the petty insults. He becomes a pure instrument of duty. He gives his word, and for a borderman, his word is stronger than steel. They ride hard for the Hook. The transition is stark. From the chaotic sleeping camp to the silent, deadly efficiency of Lan's Malkieri, Kandori, and Saldaean troops. They reach the ridge as the sun bleeds grey light into the sky. To the west lies the White Tower, and looming behind it, Dragonmount, the mountain of prophecy, a symbol of hope and despair. Lan prepares to hold the line against what he expects to be 600 Aiel. But as the sun rises, the reality shifts. The scouts were wrong. Not 600, but 2,000 Aiel pour from the tree line. It is a moment of absolute clarity. Embrace death, Bukama whispers. This is the Borderlander way, not a wish for death, but an acceptance of it that removes fear. They are vastly outnumbered, The hammer of Lord Imaris is nowhere to be seen, and doom seems inevitable. Then, the narrative breaks all expectation. The Aiel column halts. 2,000 veiled warriors, the deadliest fighters on the continent, stop and look up at the ridge. They do not charge. Instead, they raise their spears in a salute. A roar thunders across the snow, a single word in the old tongue, Analine. One man alone. It is a moment of profound thematic resonance. The Aiel, who live by Jieto, honor and obligation, recognize something in Lan that the civilized lords of the south do not. They see a king without a kingdom, a man fighting a war that isn't his, purely out of duty. They are not saluting an enemy commander. They are honoring a kindred spirit. In a twist that defies military logic but perfectly fits the psychological landscape of this world, the Aiel turn and bypass the ridge. They leave Lan and his men unharmed, spared by respect, proving that in this world, honor is a force as tangible as steel. Chapter 2. A Wish Fulfilled. The sitting room of the Moiraine seat is a place of power, yet on this particular morning it feels less like a sanctuary and more like a beautifully appointed icebox. Despite the green marble hearth blazing with fire, the winter chill permeates the stone, cutting through wool and silk alike. Moiraine Damodred stands amidst this freezing draught, shivering internally, a testament to the discipline of the Accepted. She is learning the hard way that the White Tower, for all its legendary strength, is not hermetically sealed against the world. The physical cold is mirrored by a psychological chill. The heavy, acrid stench of smoke drifts through the cracks in the windows, the smell of burning villages, the scent of the Aiel War raging just outside the city walls. It is a stark juxtaposition. The delicate, colourful tapestries depicting spring gardens hanging on walls that feel like frozen iron. Moiraine observes the two Aes Sedai in the room, Tamra Ospenia, the Moiraine seat, and her keeper, Gitara Moroso. They sit in apparent serenity, the famous Aes Sedai mask firmly in place. To an outsider, they look untouched by the cold or the war, but Moiraine, sharp and observant, senses the tension radiating from them. They are not merely resting, they are waiting. The weight of the world rests on Tamra's shoulders, represented by the stole of 7 colors she wears, symbolizing her dominion over all ages. Beside Moiraine stands Siwan Sanche. The dynamic between these two is fascinating. A Kaya Hyenin noblewoman and a Tyren fisherman's daughter, united by their spark and their ambition. Where Moiraine is water and grace, Siwan is earth and practicality. In this moment, they are equals in their discomfort and their duty, silent witnesses to history. They are the unseen furniture of the room, accepted who must be present but unheard. The silence is shattered not by the wind, but by the distant, frantic call of trumpets, hundreds of them. The sound signals a turning point in the battle for Tar Valon. The Amirlin breaks her stillness, ordering Moiraine to check for news, and Siwan to brew tea. It is a mundane domestic task set against the backdrop of slaughter, a classic Robert Jordan duality where the ordinary brushes against the apocalyptic. Moiraine checks the anteroom, finding only a distracted novice Elin, reading a romance novel, a triviality that highlights the innocence still existing within the tower's walls, innocence that is about to be shattered. Finding no official messengers, Moiraine returns to the sitting room. As Siwan prepares the tea, channeling the one power to boil the water, a small infraction permitted in the urgency of the moment, the atmosphere in the room shifts violently. The keeper, Gitara Moroso, a woman rumoured to possess the rare and erratic talent of foretelling, suddenly stiffens. The ink jar on her table overturns, a pool of black spreading like a dark omen across the wood. Gitara rises, terror etched into her ageless features. She does not speak to the room. She speaks to the pattern itself. She cries out that he is born again, the dragon. On the slopes of Dragonmount, amidst the snow and the thunder, the soul that broke the world has returned. It is a proclamation of salvation and doom entwined. The sheer force of the vision burns through her. As the last word leaves her lips, the life leaves her body. She collapses into Moiraine's arms, a vessel shattered by the magnitude of the message it carried. The scene turns frantic yet controlled. Tamra attempts to heal her keeper, but death is the one ailment the One Power cannot cure. The realization settles heavy in the room. The dragon is reborn. The most feared man in history is back. Tamra Ospenya's reaction defines the path of the future. She does not weep. She becomes the Amerlin's seat. She looks at Moiraine and Siuan, two young women who were never meant to hear this, and binds them with a command of absolute secrecy. They are to lie, even to other sisters. In this moment, the conspiracy is born. The innocence of their training is gone, replaced by a secret that could still the world's heart. Moiraine had wished to witness a foretelling, and the pattern, with its cruel sense of irony, granted her wish in the most terrifying way possible. The war outside is meaningless now. The true battle has just begun. Chapter 3. Practice. The corridors of the White Tower are silent, vast, and biting with the chill of winter. It is a cold that seeps through the heavy tapestries hanging along the white marble walls, a physical manifestation of the tension gripping Tar Valon. The Aiel War has raged outside these walls, and though the fighting has ceased, the atmosphere remains brittle. Moiraine, Damodred, and Siuan Sanche walk these empty halls, their footsteps muffled by the blue runners that offer scant protection from the freezing stone. There is a profound sense of isolation here. While the novices and other accepted are at breakfast, these two young women are alone with a secret that could shatter the world. The tapestries flutter in the drafts, and the stand lamps flicker, struggling against the gloom. Moraine's mind is adrift, caught between the mundane architecture of the tower, the coloured floor tiles representing the 7 Arjas, and the cataclysmic knowledge she now possesses. The dynamic between Moiraine and Siuan is a fascinating study in contrasts that defies the social structures of the outside world. Moiraine is high nobility, a woman bred in the Sun Palace of Caerhien to understand the subtle game of houses. Siuan is the daughter of a Tyrian fisherman, born to rough docks and hard labour. Yet, in the meritocracy of the White Tower, and in the intimacy of their friendship, the fisherman's daughter leads, and the noblewoman follows. It is a testament to Siuan's innate strength of will, a determination as relentless as the tides she once watched. They speak of the future, of Siuan's desire to see lands beyond the maps, to sail the Arid Ocean. It is a moment of poignant innocence, dreaming of adventure when destiny is about to force a much darker journey upon them. But the conversation inevitably circles back to the forbidden topic. The dragon is reborn. The psychological weight of this realization cannot be overstated. For 3,000 years, the world has lived in the shadow of the prophecies. The dragon is the world's only hope against the Dark One, yet he is also its promised destroyer. He will channel Saidin, the male half of the One Power, which is irrevocably tainted by the Dark One. To wait for the dragon is to wait for a man who is destined to go mad, a man who will break the world again, just as Luz Therin Telamon did during the time of madness. Moiraine shudders, not from the drafty corridor, but from the existential horror of it. The history books are filled with the atrocities of false dragons, men who rotted from the inside out due to the taint. And now the true dragon has taken his first breath. It is a paradox of salvation and damnation that the Aes Sedai must now manage. Seeking refuge from these terrifying thoughts and obedience to the Amarlin's command for silence, they retreat to the Accepted's quarters in the tower's western wing. The setting shifts to Siuan's room, a stark contrast to a palace furnished with the rough simplicity required of those in training. Here, they turn to the discipline that defines their lives, the One Power. As they embrace Saidar, the female half of the true source, the narrative dives into the sensory experience of channeling. It is described not just as magic, but as a heightened state of being. The world becomes sharper, more vivid. The very air feels alive. It is a sensation of pure joy and life that makes the drab reality of the ordinary world pale in comparison. This is the seduction of the power, the danger of drawing too much, of burning oneself out for the sake of that ecstasy. They practice for the test of the shawl. The test is a brutal examination of composure under pressure. An Aes Sedai must remain calm in the face of death, torture, or catastrophe. To simulate this, Siwan and Moiraine take turns holding complex, useless weaves, while the other attempts to break their concentration. This practice session reveals the intense mental conditioning required of the White Tower. Siwan, with her rough humor, uses pranks and sudden noises. Moiraine must maintain the serenity of a still pond. It is a microcosm of what their lives will become, holding together the threads of the world while chaos screams in their faces. Their solitude is broken by Myrelle and later Tana, fellow accepted who serve to highlight the political landscape of the tower. Myrelle is fiery and mercurial, hinting at the interpersonal conflicts and alliances that form early among the initiates. Tana is cold, emotionless, a statue of ice who represents the rigid, unfeeling perfection some Aes Sedai strive for. Through them, we see the rumors swirling about the death of Gitara Moroso. The tower is a hive of whispers, and Moiraine and Siwan must navigate this social minefield, guarding the truth of the foretelling with the skill of seasoned players of the game of houses. Suddenly, the routine is shattered by a summons. The Emerlin seat, Tamra Ospenia, calls the accepted to the Oval Lecture Hall. The atmosphere in the hall is thick with speculation. The numbers of the accepted are few, a subtle nod to the slow decline of the White Tower's influence and population over the centuries. When Tamra appears, she does not reveal the foretelling. Instead, she demonstrates the quintessential Aes Sedai ability to speak truth that deceives. She announces a bounty, a gift of gold for every woman who bore a child during the siege of Tar Valon. On the surface, it is a gesture of benevolence, a thanksgiving for the city's safety. But Moiraine sees the hidden dagger behind the charity. The Emerlin is mobilizing the accepted to take a census. They are to scour the camps and the city, recording the names of mothers and, crucially, the birth dates of their infants. This is the genius of the White Tower's intelligence network. They cloak their desperation in generosity. The accepted are thrilled by the prospect of leaving the tower, of the adventure of interacting with the soldiers and camp followers. They are warned of the dangers, the rough men, the white cloaks, who would see an accepted as a dark friend witch to be killed. But they do not understand the true magnitude of their task. They are being sent to find the boy who will shake the foundations of time. As Moiraine and Siwan exchange glances, the thrill of the hunt mixes with the dread of the discovery. They are no longer just students practicing weaves in a cold room. They are the first hunters in a search that will span decades. The chapter closes on this precipice, the transition from the theoretical study of magic to the practical, dangerous application of power in the real world. The wheel weaves as the wheel wills, and the hunt for the dragon reborn has begun. Chapter 4. Leaving the Tower. The stark reality of the White Tower often clashes with the romanticized view of the outside world, and nowhere is this clearer than in Moiraine's quarters. The room is a study in Spartan discipline, a cracked mirror, a battered basin, and furniture that wouldn't look out of place in a peasant's farmhouse. It serves as a reminder that before one can wield the power to shake the earth, one must first endure the cold. And it is cold. Moiraine, ever the pragmatist, layers woolen stockings and stout, ugly leather shoes, sacrificing vanity for the biting practicality of winter. She prepares for this journey not just as a scribe for the Amelin census, but as a woman stepping into a dangerous unknown. From the back of her wardrobe, she retrieves a silver-mounted dagger. This is a significant psychological pivot for Moiraine. Initiates are forbidden to use the One power as a weapon, and carrying a blade suggests she is already mentally separating herself from the tower's shelter. She anticipates a world where the three oaths do not yet bind her, but where danger is immediate. She packs with meticulous foresight, ink, paper, sewing kits, while Siwan Sanche, her partner in this clandestine hunt for the dragon reborn, is caught up in the frenetic energy of the hallway. The gallery outside is a cacophony of borrowing and lending, a sharp contrast to the silent gravity of Moiraine's intent. To the others, this is a field trip. To Moiraine and Siwan, it is the beginning of the most important search in 3,000 years. The scene at the West Stable offers a glimpse into the divergent natures of these two future Aes Sedai. Moiraine is composed, mounting her mare, Arrow, a horse chosen not for height, which Moiraine lacks and dislikes highlighting, but for sheer endurance. She is regal even when ignoring the mockery of a groom who finds amusement in an Accepted's precautions against leaking ink. Siwan, conversely, is a disaster on horseback. The daughter of the river, who can read the currents of the world like a book, is utterly defeated by a saddle. She clings to her grey gelding, her ineptitude drawing stares from the tower guard. It creates a texture of vulnerability around them. They may possess the spark of creation, but they are still young women herded by gruff soldiers. Their escort is led by Bannerman Steeler, a man unimpressed by their potential power. As they ride into the streets of Tar Valon, Robert Jordan treats us to the architectural magnificence of the city. It is a metropolis that breathes history, dominated by the impossible organic curves of Ogier masonry. We see buildings that resemble waves or birds taking flight, a testament to a time when builders sang to stone. The streets are a kaleidoscope of humanity, borderlanders, Tyrans, Damani, all conducting business with an air of normalcy. It is a surreal juxtaposition. The world outside is burning from the Aiel War, yet within the island city, the commerce of nations continues, insulated by the White Tower's shadow. However, the illusion of safety fractures at the Alindea Gate. High upon the bridge, an architectural marvel arching over the Arinin, Staler halts the column. The path is blocked by the Children of the Light. The White Cloaks, with their golden sunbursts, represent the ideological antithesis of the Aes Sedai. Here, Moiraine's aristocratic upbringing and fiery temper nearly betray her. She prepares to embrace the source, ready to lash out at their arrogance. It is Siwan who checks her. This moment perfectly encapsulates their dynamic. Moiraine is the force and the fire, but Siwan is the anchor, possessing the street-smart caution Moiraine lacks. Siwan sees the pattern of consequences, where Moiraine sees only the immediate insult. Leaving the bridge, they enter a landscape scarred by the recent siege. The village of Alindaya feels dead, littered with the detritus of fleeing refugees. It is here that Siwan attempts to assert control. She possesses a unique talent for seeing patterns, puzzles, logic, and people, and she tries to manipulate Bannerman Steeler into heading toward Dragonmount, where the prophecy suggests the child was born. She adopts the imperious tone of the Amailin seat, invoking authority she does not yet possess. But the Bannerman is a creature of orders, not nuance. He rebuffs her, keeping them on the assigned path south, away from the mountain. It is a crushing moment of reality. Their intellect is superior, but their station is still low. They are bound by the hierarchy they seek to ascend. The chapter closes as they arrive at the refugee camps. These are not places of glory, but of mud, noise, and the smell of unwashed bodies and smoke. They pass a camp where Serene, another accepted, is already working, before settling in a chaotic Murandian encampment. As braziers are lit to ward off the chill, Moiraine and Siwan take their seats at a folding table. The grand quest for the savior of the world has begun, not with a thunderous battle, but with the scratching of quill pens and the bureaucratic monotony of taking names in the snow. Chapter 5. The Human Heart. The cold of the refugee camps outside Tarvalon was not merely a matter of temperature. It was a physical weight, pressing down through the thin leather of gloves and the thickest of woolens. For Moiraine Damodred, a woman raised in the glittering palaces of Cairhien, the reality of the search was proving far less romantic than the concept. Here, amidst the smoke of braziers that stung the eyes and the trampled dirty snow, the glamour of the White Tower felt a world away. She and Siwan Sanche were tasked with a census, a bureaucratic hunt for a needle in a haystack, the dragon reborn, disguised as a benevolent distribution of coins to new mothers. The scene before them was chaotic, a microcosm of the world's current upheaval. Mirandian refugees, noblewomen in silk standing shoulder to shoulder with commoners in rough wool, clamored for attention. It is here that we see the first true glimpse of Siwan Sanche's inherent nature. While Moiraine hesitated, uncertain how to quell a mob without the protocols of her noble upbringing, Siwan acted with the raw, instinctive force of the tides she grew up beside. Channeling the one power, she wove air and fire, not to harm, but to amplify her voice into a thunderclap. It was a display of command that transcended mere volume. It was the authority of the Amirlin seat she would one day become, manifesting in a young accepted. She did not plead, she ordered, and the mob, recognizing power, obeyed. The task itself was a repetitive drudgery, yet it served as a lens through which Moiraine viewed the disparity of the human condition. They encountered the Lady Mary, a woman dripping with jewels and pride, intent on framing her bounty coin as a keepsake, oblivious to the hunger around her. In stark contrast was Susa Wynn, a destitute widow whose husband had died not in glorious battle, but from a slip on the ice before the fighting even began. This is the cruel reality of the pattern. Threads are cut with indifference to narrative satisfaction. Moiraine, moved by a compassion that the Tower often tries to train out of its initiates, quietly slipped the woman extra coin. It was a small rebellion, a reminder that beneath the cool exterior of an Aes Sedai, or one pretending to be, the heart must remain malleable. However, the reputation of the Aes Sedai is a double-edged sword. When a greedy woman attempted to claim the bounty for an older child, Moiraine used that reputation as a weapon, coldly offering a dangerous healing that sent the woman fleeing. It is a fascinating psychological pivot for Moiraine. She's learning that fear is a tool, but one that must be wielded with precision. The Tower relies on the world's awe, and Moiraine protected that image fiercely, refusing to be taken for a fool. The dynamic shifted abruptly with the arrival of true authority, Maelin Arganya of the Green Aja and Elida Aroyhan of the Red. The presence of these full sisters, particularly Elida with her severe intensity and bright red garb, instantly reduced Moiraine and Siwan from commanding figures back to scolded schoolgirls. We see here the rigidity of the Tower hierarchy. Even the presence of Maelin's warder, a lethal shadow of a man, highlighted the distinct philosophies of the Ajas. The green loves men and fights beside them. The red, represented by Elida's disdain, stands apart. It was Maelin who offered the chapter's titular insight, explaining the sheer volume of newborns in a war zone. She spoke of the human heart, the illogical, desperate drive to create life in the face of death. When men fear they will die, and women fear they will be left alone, they seek to leave something behind. It is a poignant observation on the cycle of the wheel. Destruction breeds creation. The logic of the White Aja might fail to grasp it, but the green, the Battle Aja, understands the passions of humanity intimately. As the sun began to dip, threatening the curfew that ruled the lives of Accepted, the atmosphere in the camp turned volatile. The refugees, desperate for the coin, threatened to riot if the table closed. It was a tense extraction, with the Bannerman Stealer barely holding back the tide of angry women and aggressive youths. The ride back to the tower was a punishing trot, revealing Siuan's lack of equestrian skill, a reminder that despite her strength in the power, she was still a fisherman's daughter bouncing painfully in a saddle, enduring physical misery to maintain her dignity and meet her obligations. Upon their return, exhausted and freezing, Moiraine received a summons from Marion, the mistress of novices. The news was grim. King Laman of Caerhien, Moiraine's uncle, had been killed in the Aiel War, along with his brothers. Here, Robert Jordan provides a masterclass in the complexity of Moiraine's character. She felt no grief. Laman had been a man of cold ambition, whose sin of cutting down the Avenda Aldera had plunged the world into war. Her reaction was not sorrow, but a disciplined, almost detached acknowledgement of the passing of a thread. She felt more genuine sadness for the widow Sousa's husband, the man who died slipping on ice, than for the king of her own blood. It marks Moiraine's transition. She is becoming a creature of the tower, her loyalties shifting from House Damodred to the greater good of the world. The chapter closes in the intimacy of the night, but there is no peace. Moiraine, haunted by nightmares, sought refuge in Siuan's room. They shared a bed, not just for warmth, but for defense against the terrifying reality of their secret mission. They both dreamed of the dragon reborn, a babe crying in the snow and a faceless man calling down lightning that shattered nations. This is the central paradox of the Wheel of Time. The savior is also the destroyer. Moiraine and Siuan, huddling together in the dark, knew that finding him was only the beginning. The tower could not teach a man to channel. It could only try to guide him before the madness took him. In the silence of the dormitory, with the weight of the prophecies pressing down on them, we see the foundation of the bond that will shape history. They are two young women against the turning of the wheel, terrified of the very thing they must find. Chapter 6. Surprises. The White Tower does not sleep, but its waking hours are governed by bells and rigid expectations. In the pre-dawn gloom, Moiraine and Siuan were roused not by the gentle light of the sun, but by the scratching of a novice named Setsuko. There is a specific melancholy cruelty in the tower's structure. Setsuko, stocky and envious, knew she would never attain the shawl, yet was forced to remain until the sisters deemed it safe to release her. In her eyes, Moiraine saw the bleak reflection of failure, a stark contrast to the destiny awaiting the two Accepted. They rushed to prepare, believing they were bound for the stables to continue the census. The air was thick with tension and cold, the corridors filled with ghostly images of other women hurrying to their duties. Sheriam, the flame-haired Accepted, chattered about the Aiel retreating east of the river, rumors hardening into facts. Yet, even as they anticipated the freedom of the ride, the tower's hierarchy intervened. Marion, the mistress of novices, intercepted them, wearing her shawl, a sign of official business that usually heralded disaster. For a heart-stopping moment, Moiraine feared she was being summoned for her test for the shawl. The psychological weight of that trial hangs over every Accepted, a mix of desperate desire and paralyzing fear. But the surprise was of a different nature. Marion informed them that due to Moiraine's grief over her uncle's deaths, they were removed from field duty. They were to spend the day copying illegible census lists instead. It seemed a punishment, a confinement to drudgery, until the door closed and Siuan revealed the depth of her own cunning. This was no accident. Siuan had planted the seed of Moiraine's fragility herself. Here we see the embryonic brilliance of the future Amelin Siat, Siwan Sanche realized that riding to one camp limited them to a single set of names. By being assigned to the central clerical work, they would see every name from every list. They were not grounded. They were positioned at the center of the web. The work was tedious, a mountain of chicken-scratch handwriting, but the stakes elevated the mundane to the momentous. They scanned for the impossible, a boy born on the slopes of Dragonmount. They found candidates, including a boy named Billy Mandaya, and Siwan began surreptitiously copying these potential dragon reborns into a small notebook. They were hunting for a savior in a haystack of ink. Later, the Merlin seat herself, Tamra, visited their makeshift office. During the inspection, Moiraine dropped her pen, staining her white dress with ink. What followed was a masterclass in Aes Sedai communication. Tamra, noticing the stain, verbally forbade the use of the one power for cleaning, yet her tone and expression granted explicit permission. Moiraine grasped the lesson instantly. The truth is not just in the words spoken, but in the intent behind them. She channeled to remove the ink, a small act of rebellion sanctioned by the highest authority, reinforcing that rules in the tower are often malleable for those who know how to play the game. But the day held a darker surprise, one that had nothing to do with the prophecies of the dragon. Moiraine was approached by a succession of sitters from the hall of the tower, beginning with Yana of the Grey and Sutama of the Red. They pulled her aside, not to speak of the world's salvation, but of the sun throne of Caerhien. With King Laman dead, the succession was open, and the tower looked at Moiraine not as an initiate, but as a political asset. Sutama asked the question that turned Moiraine's blood to ice. Had she ever considered becoming queen? The realization struck her with the force of a physical blow. The tower intended to use her bloodline to place an Aes Sedai on a throne for the first time in 1,000 years. The chapter closes on a note of claustrophobic terror. Moiraine's nightmares of the crying babe and the breaking world were now joined by a new horror. Herself as a puppet queen, dancing on strings held by the hall. Her desire to pass the test for the shawl transformed from ambition to a desperate need for escape. She had to become Aes Sedai not to rule, but to flee before the tower could shackle her to a crown. Chapter 7. The Itch. The scroll of names grew, yet Moiraine realized that the truth was buried beneath layers of maternal terror. The prophecies of the dragon were not merely stories to the common folk, they were promises of madness and the breaking of the world. No mother would willingly admit her son was born on Dragonmount, marking him as a channeler doomed to insanity, or worse, the dragon reborn. The search for the child would require piercing through protective half-truths, a high-stakes game of Dice Daymar where the board was the world itself. Tension tightened the air when the Merlin, Tamra or Spenya interrupted their secret cataloguing. Moiraine concealed her notebook with a clumsy curtsy, fearing discovery. To be caught now meant rustication, exile to a farm, stripped of the one power, cutting the thread of her destiny before it began. But Tamra brought a mission, not punishment, a sealed letter for Kareni Nagashi. Entering the Green Aja quarters was stepping into a barracks clothed in silk. Here, the floorstones bore images of swords, and tapestries depicted the desperate glory of ancient last stands. This was the Battle Aja, sisters who prepared not for politics, but for Tarman Gaidon. The presence of warders changed the very atmosphere. These men moved with the lethal, predatory grace of leopards, their capacity for violence disciplined only by the bond. Meeting a warder's gaze was like looking into the eyes of a raptor, utterly self-aware and dangerous. Kareen, an ageless woman of iron serenity, read the message and mobilized instantly. There was no hesitation, only the swift, silent preparation of a soldier. She and her warders, Stepin and Karile, were ready to ride, proving that for the Green, the mission is always immediate. The intricate weaving of the pattern became clear when Siwan revealed she had delivered a similar urgent summons to a sister of the Grey. Moiraine's mind, already showing the analytical sharpness of the blue Aja she would eventually join, slotted the pieces together. Tamra was bypassing the hall and, crucially, the red Aja. The Amerlin knew the Reds might kill the child to prevent another breaking. Instead, she was recruiting 5 specific sisters, women of strict honor and adherence to law, to serve as secret searchers. Their task was to find the boy and hide him, not from the Dark One, but from the tower itself. Yet the full design remained tantalizingly out of reach. When Moiraine attempted to spy on the Amerlin study to confirm her deductions, she was intercepted by the new keeper, Aeldra Najaf. Sharp-featured and devoid of vanity, Aeldra offered a gentle but absolute warning against such curiosity. Moiraine was forced to retreat, the secrets of the tower stinging her like a phantom itch on her shoulder blade, a maddening ignorance she could not scratch, foreshadowing the heavy, solitary burdens of knowledge she would carry for the rest of her life. Chapter 8. Shreds of Serenity. The White Tower, usually a bastion of timeless calm, has succumbed to a feverish tension. Following the shock of Gitara Moroso's death and her apocalyptic foretelling, the Aes Sedai struggle to maintain their famous composure. Moiraine and Siwan Sanche find themselves navigating a minefield of short tempers and petty refusals as the sisters' masks of serenity slip to reveal the anxiety beneath. It is a psychological pressure cooker. The women of the tower are burdened by the most dangerous secret in the world. The dragon has been born, and that knowledge manifests as irrational anger toward the accepted. Moiraine, driven by a blue Aja's innate desire for action, burns with impatience. While she continues her studies, learning history from Karine Nagashi and law from Aisha, her mind is entirely on the list of newborn babes. She perceives a terrifying lack of urgency among the senior sisters. They wait for the census to be perfect, fearful of alerting the world, while Moiraine agonizes over the delay. She understands the strategic necessity of caution, yet her soul screams for movement. The wars in the south and rumors of the Blight stirring only amplify her dread. She realizes that to the Aes Sedai, rumor is a chaotic variable to be ignored, but to her, it is the drumbeat of the world she longs to save. But the true crucible of this chapter arrives in the form of Elida Aroyhan. The Red Sister interrupts Moiraine and Siwan's private practice, not to instruct them with words, but to forge them through pain. What follows is a brutal, visceral deconstruction of Moiraine's ego. Elida demands they weave complex flows of the one power, while she physically assaults them with switch-like blows and deafening noises. This is more than hazing. It is a twisted methodology. Elida is attempting to force serenity into them by breaking their natural reflexes to flinch or panic. Moiraine fails repeatedly, reduced to weeping on the floor, her concentration shattered by the relentless physical abuse. It is a humbling, humanizing moment for the woman who will become a legend of endurance. Siwan fares slightly better, displaying that iron-willed stubbornness that will one day define her Amerlin seat, but even she is pushed to her limit. The torment ends only when Moiraine, the mistress of novices, intervenes. Here, the narrative offers a fascinating inversion of expectations. Moiraine reveals that Elida was not merely being sadistic, she was effectively helping them cheat. The test for the shawl requires weaving under extreme duress and terror. Elida, in her harsh way, was preparing them to survive that ordeal. However, because Moiraine chastised Elida for her methods, the Red Sister assumes Moiraine and Siwan complained. This misunderstanding plants the seeds of a lifelong enmity. Elida's eyes, burning with humiliation and hatred, promise retribution. It is a tragic irony. The moment Elida tried to help ensure their success is the moment she became their permanent adversary. As the chapter closes, the weather abruptly warms, melting the winter snows. This thaw is not just meteorological. It signifies the pattern locking into place. The time frame for the dragon's birth is set. The waiting is over. In the pre-dawn light, Moiraine arrives with the words that end Moiraine's childhood forever. She is summoned to test for the shawl. The great game has begun. Chapter 9. It begins. The descent into the White Tower's foundation is a journey into silence. Moiraine follows Moiraine, the mistress of novices, down spiraling stairs that bore deep into the island's bedrock, leaving the sunlit world far behind. With every step, a cold dread crystallizes in her stomach, a physical weight that feels like swallowed ice. The pressure of her training, particularly the brutal extra lessons forced upon her by Elida, echoes in her mind like a drumbeat of doom. She's convinced she will fail, and in the White Tower, failure during the final test means exile, put out of the tower never to return. Yet as the stone walls close in, the young Damodred finds a strange anchor in her own secret rebellion. Even if she is cast out, she realizes she remains a channeler. She remains a noble of Cairhien. Most importantly, she still possesses the copy of the names, the census of newborn babes, that might include the dragon reborn. This singular clandestine purpose quiets her terror. The tower demands total submission, but Moiraine realizes that her soul belongs to a mission greater than the tower itself. It is this hidden resolve that steadies her trembling hands as she enters the lowest level. Here the architecture changes. The rough-hewn stone gives way to polished white walls and a vast, domed chamber centered around a relic of the Age of Legends, the ter'angreal. It is a great oval ring, unsupported, shivering with colors that shift from gold to blue to green. It is a gateway to other worlds, or perhaps to the deepest recesses of the mind. The ritual is stark. Moiraine must stand before the gathered Aes Sedai, including a menacing Elida, and strip away her identity, literally. She disrobes, standing clad only in the light, a gesture symbolizing that an Aes Sedai hides nothing from her sisters and brings nothing of her old life into her new one. It is a moment of profound vulnerability, heightened by the realization that she must hide the small notebook of names in her pouch, leaving it on the floor. If they look, she is ruined. But the test demands focus. She is given a specific instruction. She must enter the ter'angreal, face whatever lies within, and perform a specific weave 100 times. She must maintain perfect composure. It is not merely a test of power, but of dissociation, the ability to function while the world burns around you. Moiraine steps into the shimmering oval and the world vanishes. The testing ground is a shifting nightmare designed to exploit her specific fears. She finds herself in a palace corridor, then a courtyard dressed in the finery of her noble house. But the environment is hostile. Her clothes dissolve, leaving her exposed to the leering gaze of rough men. The test here is one of aristocratic pride warring with shame. She must walk a steady pace, neither hurrying nor hanging back, while humiliated. She creates the required weave, but also weaves a wall of air to protect herself, learning the crucial lesson of the Aes Sedai. Do what is required by law, but do what is necessary for survival. The scene shifts violently. She's in a drought-stricken village, then ensnared by blackclaw bushes. The physical sensation is horrifically real. Thorns shred her skin, and death's head spiders, creatures she instinctively knows from the Aiel waste, begin to swarm her. This is a test of pain and panic. While her mind screams to brush away the venomous arachnids, she must force her will into the complex, useless pattern of the required weave. It is a brutal exercise in splitting the mind, She burns the spiders with flows of fire while maintaining the test weave, a duality that defines the life of a sister, maintaining the grand illusion of serenity while battling for one's life in the shadows. Then, the danger escalates to lethal levels. She steps into a stone arena and faces the shadow itself. Trollocs drop from the walls, wolf-muzzled, eagle-beaked monstrosities. This is no longer a test of embarrassment or pain, but of war. The sheer number of beasts forces Moiraine into a state of hyper-focus. She cannot just stand and weave, she must move. And here we see the essence of Moiraine emerge. She begins to dance. Humming a court song, she steps through the motions of a palace ball, using the rhythm to organize her frantic weaving. She hurls fire and lightning while pirouetting, turning the slaughter into a terrifying ballet. It is a profound psychological insight into her character. She imposes order and grace upon chaos to survive it. Chapter 10, it finishes. The ordeal stretches on, blurring the line between reality and hallucination. 99 times she weaves. She is drowned, burned, bitten and beaten. She faces mobs and monsters shifting from deserts to frozen peaks. The physical toll is immense, but the mental erosion is worse. The ter'angreal strips away her sense of time and self, leaving only the command to remember what must be remembered. The 100th weave is the cruelest, clearly tailored by someone who knows her heart, likely Elida. Moiraine finds herself in a serene garden, battered and bleeding from previous visions. Her father appears. He is not a monster or a threat. He is simply her father, frantic with grief, telling her that her mother is dying and she must come now. This is the ultimate test of the White Tower, the severance of all prior loyalties. To be Aes Sedai is to be an orphan by choice. Moiraine must look into the face of the man she loves, hear his plea, and walk past him toward the final star. She whispers her love, a small rebellion of sentiment, but she does not stop. She chooses the tower over her blood. She stumbles out of the ter'angreal, back into the cool silence of the basement. "It is done," Marion intones. The brutality of the test is sealed in silence, a shared trauma that binds all Aes Sedai together. Moiraine has passed. The aftermath is a strange mix of relief and alienation. Anaya heals her physical wounds, washing away the cuts and bruises, but the memory of the trauma remains. When Moiraine returns to the Accepted's quarters, the dynamic has irrevocably shifted. Her friends, Sheriam and Morel, treat her with a sudden stiff deference. She has crossed a threshold they have not. The loneliness of the shawl begins before she even wears it. She waits in solitude, eating a celebratory meal that tastes like ash and victory, until the door opens. Siwan Sanche returns. The reunion is understated but powerful. Siwan has also passed, though her flushed face hints at her own ordeals within the oval ring. They are survivors, united not just by the shawl, but by their secret quest for the dragon reborn. In this moment of exhaustion, they choose one final act of childish rebellion before the weight of the world settles on their shoulders permanently. They decide to play a prank on Elida. It is a perfect, humanizing conclusion to the harrowing trauma of the testing. They will slip mice into the bed of the woman who tortured them. It is a reminder that beneath the ageless faces and the power they are about to assume, they are still young women, fiercely alive and refusing to be completely broken by the institution that now owns them. Tomorrow, they are Aes Sedai. Tonight, they are just Moiraine and Siwan, settling the score. Chapter 11. Just before dawn. The long night of contemplation had ended, leaving Moiraine with grainy eyes and a spirit trembling on the precipice of irrevocable change. In the solitude of her room, lit only by a dying fire and a single lamp, the weight of what approached felt as unscalable as Dragonmount itself. There is a profound psychological threshold in the life of an initiate where the safety of being a student dissolves into the terrifying agency of adulthood. And for Moiraine, that moment had arrived. She dressed with the precision of a soldier preparing for battle, donning the white garments that would soon be discarded, for the White Tower is patient, but it is also demanding. When the summons came, 3 firm raps upon the wood, her heart betrayed her composure. 7 sisters waited in the shadowed hallway, their faces masks of ageless serenity, shawls wrapped tight. Among them stood Elida, a presence that once made Moiraine quail, yet now Moiraine met the Red Sister's gaze with a newfound steadiness. This ritual was not merely a promotion, it was an equalizer. Silence was the law of this procession, a quietude that amplified the gravity of their descent into the tower's roots. They collected Siuan, whose defiance simmered even in her silence, and together, surrounded by the ring of Aes Sedai, they marched into the deep history of the tower. Down in the subterranean levels, they stood before the hall of the tower. The Amelin seat, Tamra Ospenya, awaited them, framed by the oval terangriel used for testing. Here, the narrative highlights the profound bond between Moiraine and Siuan. In a breach of strict propriety, they answered the ritual questions in unison, their voices intertwining as their fates had for years. They entered the chamber hand in hand, a subtle rebellion against the isolation the tower often demands. The ceremony of the oath rod followed, a moment of visceral transformation. This smooth, ivory-white artifact was no mere symbol, it was a binder of souls. When Moiraine gripped it, channeling the one power, the first oath against lying settled upon her. It was a sensation of cognitive dissonance, where the very concept of untruth became a physical impossibility. Her tongue paralyzed against deception. The subsequent oaths, to make no weapon for man and to never use the power as a weapon save in defense, felt like an invisible garment being stitched directly into her skin, constricting and suffocating. This tightness is a tangible manifestation of the Aes Sedai's burden. They are powerful, yet paradoxically leashed by their own vows. While Moiraine fought to keep from gasping under the metaphysical pressure, Siuan displayed the heart of a lion. She spoke the words without a tremor, absorbing the binding as if she were made of iron. With the words spoken, the White Tower was graven onto their bones. They were no longer accepted. They were Aes Sedai. The choice of Aja followed, though the decision had been made in their hearts long ago. They walked to the Blue, the seekers of causes, the faction that sought to right wrongs rather than merely administer justice. As the other Ajas departed, the Blues welcomed them home. The solemnity of the ritual shattered briefly into warmth, revealing the hidden humanity of the sisterhood. There were kisses of welcome and even jokes about customary pies, a jarring but necessary reminder that beneath the ageless masks and world-shaping power, these women remained human. Yet, as they walked back to the upper levels, the duality of their new existence became clear. They were wrapped in their shawls, feeling inches taller, yet they were immediately besieged by the arcane, often ridiculous customs of the Aja. It was a lesson in the culture of the tower, ancient power wrapped in layers of bureaucratic tradition. Chapter 12. Entering Home. Crossing the threshold into the Blue Aja quarters, Moiraine and Siuan stepped into an environment curated to evoke serenity. Halls lined with tapestries of spring gardens and flowing brooks, a sharp contrast to the stone austerity of the rest of the tower. The welcome continued, a procession of embraces, but the warmth concealed sharp lessons in hierarchy. They were summoned to Aedith, a sitter and the first selector. Here, the narrative peels back the curtain on the true structure of power among Aes Sedai. It is not age or wisdom that dictates precedence, but raw strength in the one power. Aedith's warning was stark. They must learn to gauge the strength of every sister they meet, and offer deference accordingly. This meritocracy of force is one of the Tower's harshest realities. It forces women to constantly measure their worth against one another, fostering an environment of perpetual silent competition. For Moiraine and Siuan, who possessed immense potential, this meant navigating a dangerous middle ground, deferential now, but destined to eventually stand above many who currently commanded them. The complexity of their new life escalated with the arrival of Setalia de Lam, the head of the Blue Ajah's eyes and ears. Setalia, blunt and perceptive, immediately separated the two friends based on their inherent talents. She saw Siuan not as a fisherman's daughter, but as a brilliant solver of puzzles, tossing her complex codes and reports to decipher. Siuan's ability to deduce the rules of a card game she had never played proved her worth to the spymaster. Moiraine, however, faced a different reception. Setalia dismissed her as a pretty little porcelain doll, a stinging insult that reduced the Kyrian noblewoman to her appearance. It highlights the prejudice Moiraine constantly fights against, her petite stature and beauty often masking her steel. While Siuan was recruited for intelligence work, Moiraine was assigned the task of distributing the bounty for the Aiel War. It felt like busy work, a dismissal of her capabilities. Later, in the privacy of their rooms, the emotional toll of the day surfaced. Siuan found Moiraine despondent, not just from the insult, but from a deeper, more political fear. Moiraine confessed a terrifying secret. She believed the Hall intended to maneuver her onto the Sun Throne of Cairhien. This insight into the game of houses reveals the terrifying reach of the White Tower. They view nations as game pieces, and Moiraine as a pawn to stabilize a war-torn region. Moiraine, knowing the dark history of her ancestors, wanted no part of ruling, fearing she would be forced into monstrosity to survive. Siuan, ever the anchor, offered comfort and healing, reinforcing their bond against the machinations of the institution they had just sworn to serve. Far to the south, the narrative shifts to a colder, starker reality. Lan Mandragoran, the uncrowned king of Malkia, stood in the foothills of the spine of the world. The Aiel War was effectively over, the Great Retreat having begun. Amidst the snow and the trampling of armies, Lan felt a magnetic, almost painful pull toward the north, a visceral calling to the Blight and his unending war against the Shadow. Yet, accompanied by his mentor Bukama, he turned south. He sought to avoid Tar Valon and its Aes Sedai at all costs, weary of their manipulations. The irony, thick and tragic, permeates the scene. As Moiraine begins her life as an Aes Sedai, fearing political entrapment, the man destined to be her warder rides away from her, both of them moving blindly through the pattern that will inevitably crash them together. Chapter 13. Business in the City. The transition from Accepted to Aes Sedai is often described as a sudden leap, but for Moiraine Damodred and Siuan Sanche, it manifests first in the simple sensory reality of a meal. They sit now in the sisters' main dining hall, a space of high ceilings and winter tapestries, where the very furniture speaks of hierarchy. Gone are the benches of the lower ranks. Here, they sit on carved chairs, served on silver trays and Tarrabona porcelain. It is a world of silent power and exclusivity. Yet even as they eat, the political machinery of the White Tower grinds around them. Moiraine, ever the master of the game of houses, senses the eyes upon her. She wears her shawl with defiance, a shield against the rumors that the Hall intends to place her on the Sun Throne of Cairhien. For Moiraine, this newfound status is not just a privilege, it is a precarious ledge. The financial reality of their new station arrives in the form of a stipend, 1,000 gold crowns a year. Here, the deep psychological divide between the two friends is laid bare. Siuan, the fisherman's daughter who knows the biting cold of poverty, treats the sum with terrified reverence, hoarding it within the safety of the tower's own vaults. To her, wealth is a buffer against starvation, To Moiraine, raised in the Sun Palace, wealth is merely a tool of influence. She understands that power often stems from the appearance of power. She directs her funds to a private bank in the city, a move of independence that foreshadows her future as a woman who operates outside the tower's direct control. Venturing into Tar Valon, Moiraine's journey to the banking house of Ilan Dormail is a study in calculated projection. She hires a sedan chair and bearers, moving through the chaotic, vibrant streets where the common folk keep a respectful, perhaps fearful, distance from the White Tower. Upon reaching the bank, a building of restrained southern elegance, Moiraine is greeted not just as a patron, but as a player in a dangerous game. Mistress Dormail reveals that a man posing as a Tower Guard captain, calling himself Rhys Gorthanes, had attempted to pry into Moiraine's finances. The description, a scarred, tall Carheenan, rings no bells, but the implication is chilling. The Hall is already moving, using spies to track her resources, likely to gauge her readiness for the throne. The bank, in its discretion, had the man beaten and shipped off on a river vessel, but the message is clear. Moiraine is being hunted by her own superiors. The trap is closing. Her response is a masterclass in Dice Daimar. She does not flee immediately. Instead, she visits a high-end seamstress, Tamore Alcohima. Here, clothing is weaponized. Moiraine orders a staggering 20 dresses, a volume that suggests a woman settling down, planting roots in Tar Valon. It is a feint. While she orders silks and light colors to satisfy the image of a courtier, she subtly commissions dark, durable riding habits to be made last. She is constructing a disguise of compliance while quietly armoring herself for flight. Siuan, grumbling at the expense, learns the hard lesson that for an Aes Sedai, one's appearance is a statement of authority that cannot be compromised. Chapter 14. Changes. The learning does not stop with the shawl. It merely changes shape. Moiraine and Siuan are now inducted into the secret histories and petty rivalries of the Argers. They learn that the blue and red have feuded since time out of mind, a conflict woven into the very fabric of the tower. They are taught weaves forbidden to the accepted, complex forms of the one power, including the warder bond. Most notably, they learn the concentration required to ignore heat and cold. It is a mental discipline of detachment, one that Siuan, with her hard upbringing, masters instantly. Moiraine, however, struggles to separate her mind from the physical world, often shivering or gasping, a humanizing flaw in her usually composed facade. As the Feast of Lights arrives, illuminating the city against the winter dark, a melancholic atmosphere settles over Moiraine. The tower is filled with empty rooms, dust settling in chambers unused for centuries. It is a dying institution, dwindling in numbers and influence, a physical manifestation of the world's slow decline toward the shadow. Their paths begin to diverge professionally. Siuan is absorbed into the Blue Arger's intelligence network, working for the prickly Citalia, her natural talent for puzzles and organization finally finding a home. Moiraine, conversely, is trapped in bureaucratic purgatory. She is assigned to manage the distribution of the bounty for the newborn soldiers, a task of mind-numbing tedium designed to keep her in the city. It is a cage made of paper and ink. Then the fragility of their world is exposed. Elid, a friend and fellow accepted, vanishes during her test for the shawl, a silent death that the tower glosses over, as it always does with its failures. But a far greater blow strikes soon after. Tamra Ospenya, the Amailin seat and the architect of the search for the dragon reborn, dies suddenly. The shockwave is immediate. Moiraine is devastated, not just by the loss of a mentor, but by the sudden vulnerability of their secret mission. In a display of grief that borders on rebellion, Moiraine wears a dress of the palest blue, virtually white, the color of mourning, to the funeral. It is a penance, a public display of sorrow that draws sharp looks. But Moiraine is past caring for the approval of the masses. She watches as Tamra's body is consumed by flows of fire, realizing that the only person who could protect her from the hall's machinations is gone. The new Amirlin, Sierin Vayu of the Grey Arja, is raised with brutal efficiency. Sierin is a cold, legalistic creature, devoid of Tamra's warmth. She immediately purges the tower of male staff and begins a reign of strict discipline. When Moiraine finally gains an audience to request release from her clerical duties, she meets a woman of stone. Sierin grants the release, but commands Moiraine to remain in Tar Valon, uttering the ominous words, "We will have need of you soon." The trap has snapped shut. The Hall intends to proceed with the coronation plans. Moiraine realizes that obedience now means a life sentence as a puppet queen. She returns to her room not to weep, but to act. The decision is made. She will not be a pawn in the game of houses. She will be a servant of the light. Donning her dark riding habit, the very one she secretly commissioned, she prepares to sever her ties. She leaves her shawl behind, a symbolic rejection of the tower's current corruption in favor of its higher purpose. After gathering gold and letters of rights from her banker, Moiraine heads to the river docks, moving with the urgency of a fugitive. She secures passage on a fast ship, the Blue Wing. As the vessel prepares to cast off, Moiraine embraces Saidar, her senses heightened by the power. On the dock, she spots a figure watching the ship, a tall man with a scar near his eye. It is the man who called himself Gorthanis. The realization hits her with the force of a physical blow. She is not just being pressured, she's being hunted. The Hall has eyes everywhere, and they are tracking her every move. As the wind catches the sails and the White Tower shrinks into the distance, Moiraine Damodred steps into the unknown. She is now a rogue agent, fleeing the authority she swore to obey, driven by a desperate hope to find a child who can save the world, before her own sisters can shackle her to a throne she never wanted. The search for the dragon has truly begun. Chapter 15. Into Canluum. The winds of Kandor carry a bite that the soft southern lands have forgotten, a sharpness that speaks of new spring but smells of ancient winter. For Lan Mandragoran, this chill is the scent of destiny. He rides north, leading his warhorse Cat Dancer toward the lands where he has always known his grave waits. The south has been a strange interlude, a place of political maneuvering and softer living, but here the blight is a physical weight on the horizon. It is a corruption he can feel in his blood, a tugging magnetism that pulls him toward the endless war against the shadow. He travels with Bukama, one of the last few men who carried him from the cradle of dying Malkia. They are a striking, somber pair, two tall men with the Hadori bound around their temples, the braided leather cord that marks a Malkieri sworn to fight the shadow. But where Lan is stoic, a stone polished by duty, Bukama is jagged flint, worn sharp by bitterness. Bukama grumbles at the world, at the journey, at the softening of the times. To him, the vigilance of the borderlands has slackened, and it is an affront to the memory of their lost homeland. They approach Canluum, a city fortified against the dark, surrounded by dry moats and high walls. The tension here is palpable. Rumors of bandits, and even a man channeling the One Power, have the populace on edge. Yet, commerce flows. It is the paradox of the borderlands. Life must continue even in the mouth of the beast. At the gates, the clash between the past and present erupts. A young guard, relaxed and hair shorn short, recognizes Lan. He bows to the uncrowned king, pledging readiness. But Bukama sees only a lack of discipline. He strikes the boy, berating him for abandoning the traditions of the Hadori. It is a painful moment, the rage of a man watching his culture fade into history. Lan must intervene, not with anger, but with the quiet, crushing authority of the Daishan. He diffuses the situation with the guard captain, Alin Saroku, a man who thought Lan dead in the southern wars. Siroku's shock is evident. The return of Lan Mandragoran is like a ghost walking out of legend. But Lan seeks no fanfare. He intends to rest, not to rule. He navigates the city, avoiding the high court at Stag's Stand, for he knows the nobility will try to wrap him in silk and accolades, stifling the warrior in favor of the symbol. Chapter 16. The Deeps. Lan and Bukama descend into the lower districts, the Deeps, seeking anonymity among the warehouses and taverns. This is the underbelly of Kanluum, loud and cramped, a stark contrast to the sterile nobility of the upper city. They find refuge at the Blue Rose, an inn run by a woman named Rassel, who shares a complicated, tempestuous past with Bukama. Her greeting, a violent kiss and a punch, highlights the rough affection of borderlanders, people who love fiercely because they know death is always close. Here, they reunite with Rhine Venomar, an old friend and fellow Malkieri. Rhine is a foil to Lan, flamboyant, wearing Arafelin bells in his braids, and comfortable with the shifting world. But Rhine brings news that shatters Lan's desire for a quiet return. He reveals that Lady Edine Arrel has raised the Golden Crane, the banner of the fallen Malkieri kings. She is gathering an army in Lan's name to reclaim the blight-swallowed homeland. The revelation hits Lan harder than a physical blow. The Golden Crane is not just a flag. It is a death sentence for any who follow it, a call to a war that cannot be won. Edane is his Carnera, his first lover, the woman who holds a piece of his soul according to ancient custom. But this maneuver threatens to spend Malkieri lives on a futile dream. Needing silence to process this violation of his will, Lan retreats to the stables. He sits in the straw and enters the Cody, the oneness, a meditative state where emotion is fed to a mental flame until only a void remains. In this emptiness, he fingers the heavy gold signet ring of the Malkieri kings. It is a relic of 3,000 years of defiance. A heavy burden for a man who wants only to fight his own private war. He seeks the calm of the void, the place where he is one with the sword and the world. But the peace is shattered. Bukama enters, followed by 6 men. They are not bandits. They are assassins, moving with the precision of professionals. In a split second, Lan calculates the odds. Bukama, unarmored and weary, will die if he fights. For the first time, Lan uses his royal authority to issue a direct command, ordering his old mentor to bar the door and stay back. Lan flows into the dance of swords. He is no longer a man, he is a force of nature. He moves through the forms, cutting the clouds, soft rain at sunset, the rose unfolds. The void keeps him detached, observing the violence from a distance even as he executes it. He accepts wounds to deal death, trading blood for victory. It is a brutal, beautiful display of the Blade Master's art. In moments, 6 men lie dead. As the dust settles and the inn's patrons spill out in shock, Rhine offers a chilling theory. These men were likely inspired by Edane's crusade. A living king is stubborn and refuses to lead a suicide mission. A dead martyr, however, serves the cause of the Golden Crane perfectly. Edine may love Lan, but she loves Malkia more. Lan realizes he cannot run from this. The Blight would have been a simpler enemy. Now he must ride to Chachin to confront Edane and stop the resurrection of a dead nation before it consumes the living. He sheathes his sword, the decision made. He will not be a symbol. He will be the king, if only for long enough to save his people from themselves. Chapter 17. An Arrival. The winds of Kandor bite deep, rattling shutters and chilling the bone. A stark reminder that while the calendar might claim a new spring has arrived, the world itself remains locked in winter's grey embrace. For Moiraine Damodred, 3 months into her secret exodus from Tar Valon, the grand adventure of chasing prophecy has curdled into a mixture of saddle soreness, frustration, and the stifling sensation of the three oaths tightening across her skin. She sits in the mourning house of Jureen Najima in the city of Kanlum, sipping honeyless tea, disguised not as an Aes Sedai, but as the minor noblewoman, Lady Alice. The atmosphere here is heavy with grief. Jureen clings to her daughters, recounting the tragic fire that claimed her husband and sons. Moiraine offers the requisite words of comfort, speaking of the wheel of time, weaving the pattern as it wills, but internally she winces at her own platitudes. She lacks the gravity of age to carry such words, and worse, she feels a cold, pragmatic relief. The infant killed in the fire was born in the wrong place to be the one she seeks. It is a grim reality of her mission. She finds herself thankful for the disqualification of a dead child, simply because it narrows the search for the dragon reborn. This is the isolating burden of the Aes Sedai, to place the fate of the world above the heartbreak of the individual. Leaving the house, Moiraine steps into the bustling, freezing streets of Kanlum. The city is a crossroads of nations, filled with Tyrans, Alterans and Domani, all bundled against the biting wind. She moves with caution. Her ability to channel remains hidden, but she must dodge the other sisters who walk these streets. Aes Sedai are here in numbers, parting the crowds like ships through water, their ageless faces warning commoners away. Moiraine, however, is playing a dangerous game of camouflage. To be discovered now would mean a return to the White Tower and the discipline of the Amirlin seat, Sierran Vayu, for running away. She seeks refuge at the gates of heaven, a sprawling stone inn catering to the wealthy. But the sanctuary proves to be a trap. Inside, the common room holds no fewer than 5 sisters. Moiraine attempts to slip upstairs unnoticed, relying on the deception that she is merely a wilder, a woman who taught herself to channel, who has refused to go to the tower. It is a fragile mask, and it shatters quickly. She is intercepted by Laurel and Marion, 2 sisters who know her too well to be fooled by a simple change of dress. But even their intimidating presence pales instantly with the arrival of a legend, Cadsuane Melaidrin. Cadsuane is a force of nature, a green sister of terrifying reputation who was thought to be in retirement. She moves with the confidence of a woman who has kidnapped kings and shaken thrones. Her hair is decked in golden ornaments, stars, birds, moons, and her gaze is an inescapable weight. She commands Moiraine, Marion, and Laurel into a private room, dominating the space effortlessly. Here, we see the hierarchy of power within the Aes Sedai laid bare. Cadsuane ignores custom, treating the other fully raised sisters like novices. She interrogates Moiraine, seeing through her evasions, and brings up a topic that strikes at the heart of the tower's anxieties: the dwindling. Cadsuane notes that in the Age of Legends, dozens would have outstripped Moiraine in power, but in this diminishing age, Moiraine will one day stand in the first rank. It is a melancholy observation on the fading glory of the White Tower. Cadsuane, however, is not here to philosophize. She issues orders that crush Moiraine's plans. Believing Moiraine to be a reckless new sister in need of protection, Cadsuane commands that she travel to Chachin under the watchful eyes of Laurel and Moiraine. It is a stifling decree. Moiraine is trapped, treated as a child, and threatened with physical discipline if she tries to sneak away. The legendary Green Sister leaves them with a promise to check Moiraine's bed that night, a threat that feels as solid as stone. Moiraine is left fuming, her autonomy stripped away, unaware that the true danger is not the stern discipline of Cadsuane, but a shadow much darker closing in around her. Chapter 18. A narrow passage. Moiraine flees the inn's stifling atmosphere for the cold streets, her mind racing with escape plans. It is then that the impossible happens. She spots a familiar face in the crowd, Siwan Sanche. Her closest friend and partner in this secret quest is here in Kanlum, disguised in a travel-stained dress, looking over her shoulder with the eyes of a hunted animal. They rendezvous in a dusty, narrow alley, away from prying eyes. The reunion is not one of joy, but of terror. Siuan, usually the embodiment of indomitable will, is trembling. She brings news that shatters the foundation of their world. The searchers sent out by the previous Amirlin Tamra are dying. This is not a matter of bad luck. Siuan recounts the list. Aisha, Valera, Ludis, and now Karena and Malin. They are being picked off one by one. Siuan reveals the horrifying truth she uncovered in the tower. Malin did not die of natural causes. She was murdered with the one power, leaving no mark, a technique that points to only one possibility: the Black Arja. The implications are catastrophic. For centuries, the existence of the Black Arja, sisters sworn to the Dark One, has been treated as a vile rumor, denied by the tower. But Moiraine and Siuan can no longer afford the luxury of denial. The systematic elimination of the searchers suggests a conspiracy to prevent the dragon reborn from being found, or perhaps to find him first and turn him to the shadow. The realization transforms their mission from a difficult search into a desperate race for survival. They are two young, inexperienced sisters standing against an invisible ancient enemy that rots the tower from within. Siuan, fear giving way to her natural grit, insists they must trust no one. Not the Amirlin, not Cadsuane, not the sisters at the inn. They realize that even Cadsuane's interference might be a sinister delay tactic, or perhaps she is just an unwitting obstacle. The paranoia is suffocating. Any face could hide a dark friend, any shawl could wrap a black sister. They agree to split up to cover more ground. Siuan will head to Chachin to chase down names on their list, while Moiraine will follow later. They share coin and a desperate embrace, reaffirming their oath to one another. It is a poignant moment of intimacy and shared burden. Two women against the world, holding on to the only trust they have left. Moiraine returns to the gates of heaven, her mind reeling with the spectre of treachery. The innkeeper, oblivious to her internal turmoil, adds a final indignity. He has double-booked her room. Moiraine is forced to share her small quarters with Hazel Palin, a chatty rug merchant from Mirandi. The contrast is jarring, the mundane, loud complaints of the merchant regarding cold feet and trade juxtaposed against Moiraine's silent, screaming knowledge that sisters are being murdered in the shadows. Sleep is impossible. The storm outside mirrors the chaos in Moiraine's mind. In the deepest part of the night, she decides she cannot wait for morning. She rises, embracing the true source, the one power filling her with life and light. But the door creaks open. Cadsuane is there. The legendary Green Sister has kept her word. She sees the glow of Saidar surrounding Moiraine. For a heart-stopping moment, Moiraine fears exposure or worse, but Cadsuane merely grunts, "Fool girl," and departs. It is a reprieve, perhaps born of Cadsuane's arrogance or perhaps something else, but Moiraine does not hesitate. As the merchant woman snores on, Moiraine dresses in dark silk and gathers her meager belongings, abandoning her saddlebags to travel light. She slips out of the room and into the pre-dawn gloom. She's leaving behind the safety of the inn and the oversight of the older sisters, stepping into a world where the shadows have teeth and the Black Arja is hunting. The search for the boy is no longer just a quest. It is a war. Chapter 19. Pond Water. The narrative shifts to the pre-dawn gloom of Canlum, where Moiraine Damodred executes a stealthy departure. The damp greyness of the morning reflects the clandestine nature of her mission. She is a puppet master, attempting to pull strings before the stage is even lit. She slips out of the inn, securing her mount with a bribe of silver that ensures the stable groom's silence. There is a palpable sense of youthful arrogance in her actions here. She believes herself unseen, the Aes Sedai training giving her a confidence that borders on hubris. She tracks her quarry, the three warriors she observed earlier. They are distinct figures against the fading night, two bearing the braided leather hadori of Malkia, the third chiming softly with the belled braids of Arafel. Moiraine trails them at a distance, maintaining the illusion of control. When the group splits, leaving the younger Malkieri, the intense man known as Lan, alone by a forest pond, she seizes what she perceives as an opportunity. Here, the psychological contrast between the White Tower and the borderlands comes into sharp focus. Moiraine approaches him with the intent to interrogate, planning to use the One Power to snatch his sword and unbalance him. She views him as a simple obstacle, a man to be cowed by the mystic arts. She is woefully mistaken. The encounter is a violent collision of two different kinds of lethality. Before Moiraine can fully weave her flows, Lan moves with a speed that defies the eye, a blur of martial perfection. In a heartbeat, the Aes Sedai finds herself airborne, the wind driven from her lungs as she crashes into the freezing pond. The shock breaks her connection to Saidar, leaving her gasping, soaked, and stripped of her dignity. It is a humbling moment for Moiraine. The physical world has violently asserted itself against the metaphysical. Lan's reaction is maddeningly calm. He offers a hand, not an apology, treating her like a foolish noblewoman who played a dangerous game and lost. Later, the other two men, Rhine and Bukama, return. Moiraine, drying off by a fire Lan built, watches them practice sword forms, a dance of steel so lethal it reinforces the reality that she is out of her element. Yet she adapts. Regaining her composure, she steps from the shadows and invokes ancient custom, demanding the protection due a woman traveling alone. She sweetens the demand with silver, playing the role of a wealthy traveler while hiding her Aes Sedai identity. That night, the tension simmers. Moiraine, paranoid and unable to sleep, weaves wards around the men. Overhearing Lan express a preference for trusting a serpent over an Aes Sedai, her noble temper flares. In a moment of petty retaliation, she channels a torrent of pond water onto the sleeping men. Their reaction is instantaneous and telling. They do not complain of the cold. They spring into battle stances, searching for shadow spawn. Moiraine is forced to reveal her nature to stop them, expecting awe. Instead, she receives wary silence. She has proven her power, but in doing so, she has only deepened the chasm of mistrust between herself and the uncrowned king. Chapter 20. Breakfast in Manala. Morning brings a shift in perspective, moving us closer to Lan's internal world. Moiraine has adopted the persona of Lady Alice, a role she plays with a mix of imperious command and deliberate charm. Lan remains deeply skeptical. To his seasoned eyes, she appears less like a legendary Aes Sedai and more like a wilder or a Cairienin schemer sent by his enemies. He notes the inconsistencies in her behavior, the flashes of childish temper beneath the veneer of serenity. It is a fascinating study of perception. Lan sees a bratty noblewoman where history will later see a legend. The dynamic within the group is fractured. Rhine, the Arafelin, is entirely enchanted by Lady Alice, blinded by her beauty and flirtatious manipulation. Bukama, the old warhorse, is grumpy but bound by honor to protect her. Lan stands apart, his mind a fortress of tactical assessment, refusing to be drawn into her web. They arrive at the village of Manala, a place of jarring contrasts. It is the feast of Beltine, and the village green is alive with color. Dancers weaving ribbons around the spring pole, music filling the air, the vibrancy of life asserting itself. Yet, standing as a grim sentinel to this joy, are stakes bearing the severed heads of Trollocs. This is the borderland reality. Death is never more than a heartbeat away from laughter. Moiraine pauses here, her mask slipping slightly as she admits to having faced such creatures. For a fleeting second, the warriors see a glimpse of steel beneath the silk, a shared understanding of the shadow that momentarily bridges the gap between them. At the local inn, the Ploughman's Blade, the game of cat and mouse resumes. Moiraine vanishes from the common room with a silence that begrudgingly impresses Lan. He tracks her, unwilling to let a potential spy out of his sight. He finds her questioning a villager about a woman named Avine Sahara, dropping the Lady Alice Act to conduct her true business. When Moiraine catches Lan eavesdropping, the confrontation is sharp. She attempts to use the weight of the White Tower to cow him, speaking of punishment and authority. But Lan looks down at the diminutive woman standing on her toes to appear taller, and he is unmoved. He sees through the posture. The chapter closes on a stalemate. Moiraine is desperate to maintain control, and Lan is determined to remain free of her strings, neither realizing that the pattern has already woven their threads inextricably together. The dance has begun, not with trust, but with mutual suspicion, and the cold, hard realization that they are both dangerous in very different ways. Chapter 21. Some Tricks of the Power. The road to Chachan was less a journey and more a trial of endurance, a punishing ride that met every one of Lan Mandragoran's grim expectations. They moved with the relentless pace of fugitives, bypassing the comfort of inns for the cold austerity of haylofts and the open sky. The landscape of the borderlands offered no solace. Here, isolation was a death sentence, and a solitary farm was merely a graveyard in waiting. Through this hard country, Alice, or Moiraine, as the tower knew her, maintained a frosty distance, a silence that broke only to interrogate them or to accept Rhine's fawning courtier-like praise. She was an enigma, probing their pasts like a surgeon looking for a nerve, yet offering nothing of her own. For Lan, the physical hardship of the road was compounded by a silent, invisible war. Moiraine was exacting a petty vengeance for the indignity of being dunked in the pond days prior. It began with sleeplessness, enforced by sharp, invisible flicks of air whenever his eyes closed. It escalated to grit in his boots, and then, inexplicably, a plague of ants in his clothes and a patch of blister leaf near his bedroll. She watched him for a reaction, a plea, or an apology. Lan gave her none. He retreated into the Cody, the stillness of the void, meeting her magical irritability with a wall of stone-faced endurance. It was a clash of two immense prides, the Aes Sedai demanding submission, and the uncrowned king who would break before he bowed. The Blight, however, cared nothing for their internal squabbles. When the black clouds of the north rolled down, unleashing hammering hail and freezing rain, Moiraine revealed the utility behind her arrogance. She did not seek shelter. Instead, she extended the one power, weaving an invisible dome over their heads. The thunder crashed like the drums of doom, and lightning tore the sky. But they rode in a dry, eerie silence, the hail bouncing off the shield like pebbles off a roof. She seemed genuinely surprised by their gratitude, a crack in her serene mask that suggested she was not as detached as she pretended. This power was displayed again when bandits, scruffy and desperate, blocked their path. Lan, ever the pragmatist, saw the math of death. 20 men, more behind, against 4. He prepared to bluff, to buy a slim chance of survival. But Moiraine saw only the affront to her station. She thundered at the brigands, her voice amplified by the power, and unleashed a roar of red fire above their heads. The display sent horses bucking and men fleeing in terror. Yet when the echoes faded, she was furious that Lan had allowed them to escape. In her mind, she was an Aes Sedai who could have bound 50 men. To the veteran warriors, she was a dangerous variable who didn't understand that even a lion can be pulled down by a pack of dogs. Her idealism clashed violently with their grim reality. The tension culminated near the village of Ravinda. Moiraine, distracted by her frustration with the men and her search for the names on her list, failed to sense the immediate danger until a wasp buzzed past her face. She turned to ask if Lan was allergic, only to see an arrowhead protruding from his shoulder. In a heartbeat, The source filled her. She was no longer the petty travel companion, but a weapon of the White Tower. She wove shields of air instantly, catching the assassin in the tree line just as Rhine and Bukama's arrows found their mark. The attacker, a youth named Canidrin, died with gold in his purse, the price of an Aes Sedai's life, or perhaps a king's. The aftermath revealed the depth of the chasm between them. Lan, bleeding freely from a wound that pierced him through, refused to ask for healing. He sat on a fallen tree, stoic and infuriatingly calm, seemingly more concerned with the dead man's horse than his own life. Moiraine, stung by his refusal to bend even at death's door, did not offer the gentle touch. When he finally leaned forward, silent permission granted, she channeled the healing with the force of a slap. It was a brutal, convulsing restoration that ripped him from her grasp, knitting flesh and bone in an instant. She left him whole but breathless. Her point made. She held the keys to life and death, and she would not be taken for granted. Chapter 22. Keeping Custom. Chachin rose from the earth like a challenge to the sky, a city of mountains crowned by the glittering Aes Sedai palace. To Lan, the city was a sanctuary from the road, but also a cage of a different sort. The sensory assault of the capital, the raucous street musicians, the smell of roasting meat and unwashed bodies, was a stark shift from the clean, cold air of the wilderness. Here, amidst the tiles and the noise, the dynamics of their strange little group began to shift under the weight of civilization. At the palace gates, the reality of who Lan was began to supersede the guise of the rough traveler. The guards did not see a worn mercenary. They saw the golden crane. The respect afforded to him, the deep bows, the murmurs of Taishar Malkia, stripped away the anonymity he often wore like a cloak. Even Moiraine's petty torments seemed to lose their teeth in the face of his heritage. He was no longer just a stubborn man to be disciplined. He was royalty in exile, walking into the heart of friendly territory that felt uncomfortably like a trap. While Rhine preened and looked for serving girls, and Bukama found solace among the soldiers, Lan was navigated through the political currents of the palace. He sought to avoid Lady Edain, his Carnera, the woman who had taught him the ways of love and who held a terrifying claim over his past. But the webs of the great game are spun tight in the borderlands. The trap sprung in the great formal hall. Prince Bryce, a man of iron reputation, greeted Lan with the warmth of a brother-in-arms, but even he could not forestall what Edain had planned. She appeared not as a lover in private, but as a political force in public. Wearing the red of House Gemalan, she knelt before Lan in front of the assembled nobility of Kandor and Malkia. In a voice that carried to every corner of the room, she pledged fealty to Allan Mandragoran, Lord of the Seven Towers. It was a masterstroke of manipulation. By publicly acknowledging him as king, she forced the hands of the surviving Malkieri lords and cornered Lan into a destiny he had spent years avoiding. The cheers that erupted, the golden crane, were chains being forged around him. He could not rebuke her without insulting the honor of his fallen nation. Edain had weaponized his own people's hope against him. Lan's retreat to her chambers later that day was not a surrender, but a confrontation. He found her waiting, the years having touched her with a mature beauty that was perhaps more dangerous than her youth. She held the power here, confident in her command of the old ways. Lan attempted to return the dowry, the woven cord of hair that symbolized his pledge to her, hoping to sever the connection and the obligation. He was a man grown, no longer the boy she had guided, and he refused to be a pawn in her political machinations. But Edain was a creature of ambition as much as passion. She refused the cord, effectively refusing to release him from his debt. Then she delivered the final staggering blow. She led him to the balcony and pointed out a young woman in the garden below, Izel, her daughter. Edain's plan was not merely to have Lan as a lover or a king, but to cement a dynasty. She intended for Lan to marry Aiel, effectively wedding the crown of Malkia to her own bloodline. The proposal was scandalous, twisting the sacred customs of the Carnera into a tool for dynastic grasping. Lan stood paralyzed by the audacity of it. He had survived the blight, the storms of the power, and the arrows of assassins, only to find himself outmaneuvered in a silk-draped bedchamber. Edain smiled. The lioness who had trapped the fawn and moved to claim him once more, leaving Lan staring into a future where his duty and his honor were being used to construct a cage he might never escape. Chapter 23. The Evening Star. The separation from Lan Mandragoran is not merely a tactical decision for Moiraine, it is an assertion of independence. As the warder's friends pursue him, Moiraine allows herself a moment of grim satisfaction. He thinks she requires sheltering from the grit of the world, a notion she finds insulting. To prove him wrong, and perhaps to prove something to herself, she deliberately steers her mare, Arrow, away from the manicured safety of the upper city and descends into the festering, desperate heart of Chachin. It is a psychological rebellion. She seeks the very squalor Lan believed would frighten her. The district she finds is a tapestry of despair, a place where the stone buildings are as broken as the people inhabiting them. Here, hope is a currency long since spent. Moiraine, clad in furs and silk, moves through this poverty like a beacon, or perhaps a target. It is a stark illustration of the divide between the White Tower's initiates and the common folk they are sworn to serve. To the locals, she is not a savior, but a mark. At an establishment named the Ruffled Goose, the squalor is palpable. The floor, a landscape of congealed mud. The patrons are predatory, but Moiraine's reaction to a would-be horse thief, a woman in a faded red dress, reveals the dangerous edge of her training. When the woman mocks her, Moiraine does not cower. She lashes out with the one power, a weave of air delivering a humiliating physical blow. It is a moment of hubris. Moiraine acts as judge and executioner, justified by law, but fueled by irritation. She is learning that outside the tower, respect is not given, it is enforced. Her journey through the lower districts becomes a gauntlet. At the Blind Pig she is mocked and threatened. But it is at the Silver Penny that the true danger reveals itself, masked in a veneer of kindness. The innkeeper, Nadari Satarov, presents a clean face and a warm smile, offering spiced wine. Moiraine almost succumbs to the relief of finding civility, but her instincts, honed by the great game of Cairhien and the paranoia of the Black Arger hunt, scream a warning. The anticipation in the woman's eyes betrays her. What follows is a chilling display of the Blue Arger's hidden capabilities. Moiraine does not merely defend herself, she invades the woman's mind. Using a secret weave of spirit, she induces terror and compliance. It is a violation of will, a hair's breadth away from the forbidden compulsion, justified only by the immediate threat of death. Moiraine forces the poisoner to drink her own drugged wine, leaving her incapacitated on the floor. As Moiraine steps over the collapsed woman and exits, the terrified patrons part like water. This is a crucial evolution in her character. She is realizing that justice in the chaotic world often requires a brutality the Tower rarely speaks of. The day dissolves into a series of attempted robberies and violent rebuffs, Moiraine's temper fraying with every assault on her horse. By the time twilight stretches the shadows, she is exhausted, a solitary figure against a hostile city. It is then that Siwan Sanche appears, the anchor to Moiraine's storm. Siwan, practical and sharp-tongued, has been scouring the rougher districts as well, though she blends in far better than the noble-born Moiraine. Siwan leads her to Sanctuary, the Evening Star, a respectable inn run by the formidable Aileen Tolvina. It is a place of order and safety, catering to female merchants, a stark contrast to the chaotic dens Moiraine has just survived. In the privacy of a shared room, the dynamic between the two friends shifts. Siwan is the grounded realist, Moiraine the intense visionary. Siwan reveals she has found a potential lead, Inez de Mer, a widow living in the Aes Sedai palace. Her son, Rahien, was born at dawn within sight of Dragonmount. However, the conversation takes a darker turn. Siwan brings news of a blacksmith, a man of immense strength, found dead with a broken back, but his money untouched. To the uninitiated, it is a strange murder. To Moiraine and Siwan, it is a terrifying signal. Moiraine, the black sister they suspect, possesses the strength of stone. The shadow of the Black Arja is not just a theory, it is a physical force in the city, crushing spines in the dark. Chapter 24. Making use of invisibility. The morning light brings with it the friction of conflicting methodologies. Moiraine and Siwan, dressing in the cramped safety of the evening star, engage in a battle of wills. Siwan, ever the pragmatist, advocates for caution, for remaining unseen. She fears the net closing around them. But Moiraine understands a different kind of stealth, the camouflage of prominence. She argues that to hide effectively, she must become so conspicuous that no one suspects she is on a covert mission. She intends to reclaim her identity as Moiraine Damodred. It is a gamble that relies on social engineering. They visit a banker, where Moiraine's letter of rights and her imperious demeanor, despite her lack of a retinue, command immediate respect and a flood of gold. Money, Moiraine knows, is a form of power as tangible as the One Power. It buys silence, speed, and access. She wields it at the seamstress, bypassing wait times and demanding impossible speed for new gowns, bribing her way to the front of the line with a fortune in gold. She uses the rumor of the dead king of Malkia visiting to spur the seamstress on, a masterful manipulation of local gossip. Siwan watches this with a mixture of horror and grudging admiration. She calls herself invisible in her plain clothes, while Moiraine is a flare in the night. This contrast defines their partnership. Siwan is the undercurrent, unseen and dangerous. Moiraine is the surface wave, crashing and brilliant. 2 days later, the transformation is complete. Moiraine arrives at the Aes Sedai palace not as a secretive Aes Sedai, but as a high lady of Cairhien. She arrives in a yellow-lacquered carriage with hired muscle, radiating entitlement. The palace staff, conditioned to obey nobility, welcomes her without question. It is a psychological coup. By projecting absolute confidence and entitlement, Moiraine bypasses the scrutiny that a sneaky infiltration would have invited. She is hiding in the light. Settled in luxurious apartments, the reality of their situation sets in. They are in the lion's den. If a black sister is present, or if the mysterious enemy Gorthanes has spies here, Moiraine is a sitting duck. She has painted a target on her own back to gain entry. The investigation hits an immediate wall. The Lady Inez is in deep mourning for her husband, a close friend of the prince, and has entered total seclusion. She will see no one. Moiraine's instinct is to escalate, to use her status as Aes Sedai to force a meeting. It is the arrogance of the shawl surfacing again, the belief that the White Tower opens all doors. But Siwan stops her. In this moment, the roles reverse. Moiraine, the noblewoman, is powerless against the social protocols of mourning. Siwan, posing as the maid Suki, realizes that this is her battlefield. While the lords and ladies are bound by etiquette, the servants are the true arteries of information in any palace. The invisible class sees everything. Siwan asserts her authority, physically turning Moiraine around and taking charge of the strategy. Moiraine must play the part of the decorative, high-maintenance guest, while Siwan infiltrates the staff, using the anonymity of her station to reach the Lady Inez. As Moiraine is summoned to meet the palace Châtillon, she is forced to trust in Siwan's method. The chapter closes on the dichotomy of their existence. Moiraine walking the halls of power, exposed and vulnerable in her grandeur, while Siwan slips into the shadows, a fisherman casting her net into the dark waters of the servants' quarters, hunting for the truth that will save or doom the world. Chapter 25. An Answer. The Esdaishar Palace in Chachin stands as a monument to beauty and peace, its halls lined with tapestries of flowers and statues of playing children, rather than the martial displays one might expect in the borderlands. Yet, for Moiraine Damodred, the atmosphere is anything but peaceful. She walks a razor's edge, balancing her disguise as Alice against the undeniable reality of who she is, a sun-haired noblewoman of House Damodred, and more dangerously, an Aes Sedai. The psychological toll of this duality is heavy. She is surrounded by stone and silk, yet feels the crushing weight of exposure. As she navigates the palace, the illusion of Kandori peace is shattered by a glimpse into a courtyard where Mandragoran and his mentors Bukama and Rhine practice the sword. The brutality of their training, flesh striking flesh, serves as a grim reminder that while Kandor celebrates art, the blight still waits in the north. Moiraine knows she must avoid Lan. His sharp eyes and skepticism threaten to unravel her carefully spun web of anonymity. However, the game of houses, the subtle political maneuvering inherent to Karainen nobility, follows her even here. She endures a formal audience with Prince Bryce, a man of solid presence, and his family. It is here that Robert Jordan weaves a subtle thread that will soon become a hangman's noose. Bryce's son, young Derek, boasts of his own luck in surviving a fall, attributing his survival to the legendary luck of Mandragoran, the uncrowned king of Malkia. To the uninitiated, this is merely a child's hero worship. To Moiraine, and to the hidden predators watching, the word luck carries a terrifying implication. In this world, sudden, inexplicable luck often signals the ability to channel the one power, the very trait the Black Arja is hunting. The tension ratchets higher when Moiraine is cornered by Moiraine, a sister she once respected. Moiraine drops the mask of Aes Sedai serenity, revealing eyes of cold iron. In a moment that fundamentally alters Moiraine's understanding of the world, she realizes that Moiraine is lying. The three oaths, the binding magical laws that prevent Aes Sedai from speaking untruths, do not hold this woman. The impossibility confirms Moraine's darkest fear. The Black Arja is real, they are here, and the ancient safeguards of the White Tower are broken. Desperation drives Moiraine to gamble. She sheds her disguise and confronts Lan in his quarters, revealing her great serpent ring. The interaction between them is electric with hostility. Lan, scarred and weary, demands to know why the White Tower failed Malkia in its hour of death. It is a question that has haunted him for a lifetime. Moiraine, choosing vulnerability over manipulation, offers the painful truth. The Tower tried, but they were too late, and they buried their failure in secrecy to protect their reputation. This admission, stripped of Aes Sedai evasiveness, earns a sliver of Lan's trust. He agrees to have Bukama watch Moiraine, unwittingly setting a tragedy in motion. Back in her own rooms, the domestic normalcy of Siwan Sanchez serves as a stark contrast to the gathering storm. Siwan reveals that the baby they seek, born on the slopes of Dragonmount, fits the timeline perfectly, but the shadow is closing in. Moiraine realizes she has missed a vital piece of the puzzle, a pattern of luck that Moiraine is tracking with lethal intent. Chapter 26. When to surrender. We shift perspective to Lan, a man defined by duty and the weight of a dead nation. He moves through the palace like a ghost, utilizing the hyper-awareness learned in the Blight. He is not hunting, however. He is hiding from the machinations of Edain, who seeks to marry him to her daughter, Izel, to resurrect Malkia. Lan's internal monologue, reveals a man who believes he has no future, only a past he must carry. He is a king without a kingdom, a warrior who feels naked without his sword, even in a palace. The narrative takes a dark turn as Lan descends a staircase and is violently thrown by an unseen weave of the One Power. This is not a physical ambush, but a magical assassination attempt. Battered and bruised, he stumbles upon a scene that severs his last tether to the old ways. Bukama, the man who carried him as an infant from the burning ruin of Malkia, lies dead. A simple dagger in the back. The imagery is stark and cruel. Bukama, the symbol of loyalty and tradition, has been discarded by the Shadow's agents. Lan realizes with sickening clarity that his association with Moiraine has cost his oldest friend his life. Lan bursts into Moraine's chambers, cold fury radiating from him. But there is no time for grief. Moiraine connects the dots. Merian is eliminating anyone rumored to have luck, fearing they might be the Dragon Reborn. Young Direk and Prince Bryce are the next targets. The climax atop the palace walk is a whirlwind of violence and magic. They find Merian holding Bryce, Direk and Aiel hostage with flows of air. The betrayal is twofold. Rhine, Lan's other mentor and companion, stands revealed as a dark friend. It is a profound psychological blow. The rot of the Dark One has infiltrated even the tight-knit survivors of Malkia. The battle that ensues is chaotic and desperate. Jordan's magic system is on full display here, not as a tool of wonder, but as a weapon of terror. Merian is stronger than Moiraine, battering her with weaves of fire and spirit. Moiraine fights for her life, but she is outmatched. The horror unfolds quickly. Merian casually murders the child Direk and his father Bryce, dropping them from the precipice. It is a scene of ruthless efficiency that underscores the Black Archer's lack of empathy. While Lan engages Rhine in a duel of steel, a dance of death between two master swordsmen, Moiraine finds the resolve that defines her character. She cannot win with power, so she wins with grit. She drives her knife into Merian's back. But the victory is bitter. Aiel, the girl who only wanted to be Green Archer, falls from the railing. Moiraine catches her, blood slicking her hands, staring into the abyss. But her strength fails. Aiel slips away, plummeting to her death. The aftermath is quiet and grim. Lan has killed Rhine, surrendering to the inevitability of the fight only after his enemy is dead. You surrender after you are dead, he says, a philosophy that will come to define the bond between him and Moiraine. Moiraine, hardening her heart against the trauma, burns Merian's body with the One Power, leaving no trace of the Black Sister. They are two battered souls standing amidst the wreckage of royalty, bound by a secret war that has only just begun. Epilogue. The sun rises on a city in mourning. White banners snap in the wind, a visual representation of the grief that permeates Chachin. But for Moiraine and Siwan, there is no time for sorrow. They are the only ones who see the terrifying shape of the Black Archer's plan. The Shadow does not know the Dragon Reborn is an infant. They are blindly slaughtering any male who displays the luck of a wilder. It is a pogrom of potential saviors. Siwan, ever the pragmatist, prepares to return to the White Tower. She will take over the Blue Archer's eyes and ears, becoming the intelligence hub for their quest. It is a thankless, dangerous path, but Siwan accepts it with the grumbling resilience that is her trademark. Moiraine, however, has one final task. She rides north toward the Blight, chasing the man who has nothing left to lose. She finds Lan on a hilltop, burning a lock of hair, a symbol of his severing ties with Edain and the dream of a resurrected Malkia. He is burning his past, preparing to ride into the Blight to die alone. Moiraine offers him an alternative. She does not offer him glory or a kingdom, but a different kind of duty. She reveals the entirety of her mission: the birth of the dragon, the Black Archer, the prophecies. She places the fate of the world in his hands, It is a gamble of immense proportions, trusting this man with the most dangerous secret in existence. Lan's response is not one of joy, but of solemn acceptance. He recognizes a fellow soldier in Moiraine. He kneels, not to a queen, but to a cause. The bonding ritual is intimate and metaphysical. Moiraine weaves the flows of spirit, creating a connection that transcends speech. She feels his steely determination and his hidden pain. He feels her resolve. They are no longer two individuals. They are Aes Sedai and Warder. As they turn their horses south, away from the blight and toward the uncertain future, the symbolism is potent. The golden crane of Malkier may fly no more, but the fight for the light continues. Lan offers a final piece of wisdom: say a prayer for the dead and ride on. It is the only way to survive the Wheel of Time. They have won the battle in Chachin, but the war for the world's soul has barely commenced. Thunder rolls in the distance, promising storms to come, as the search for the dragon reborn truly begins.